Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating text from 1921 written by Swami Sivananda ParamaHamsa, the founder of the Siddha Samaj. We're going to take a close look at the rules of conduct for Siddha Vidhyarthies. What makes this source material so captivating is that it presents this striking, almost jarring mix of radical social reform, way ahead of its time for 1930s India, right alongside some incredibly esoteric and unorthodox physical doctrines. It's basically a complete blueprint for an alternative way of living, and we're going to break it all down. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 5 key themes: the Siddha Samaj vision, breaking social taboos, spiritual biology and diet, harmony with nature, and communal living and governance. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The Siddha Samaj vision. To really get these rules, we got to understand the core spiritual aim first. The text outlines 2 foundational concepts. First is jiva, which is our internal life energy. Think of it kind of like a finite battery charge. According to the Samaj, this energy naturally wants to degrade and leak outwards into the world, which is what leads to decay. So the goal is to safeguard that energy. How do you do that? Through Siddha Vidya. This is defined as a vital spiritual exercise aimed at pulling that life energy inward and upward, keeping it from escaping so it can ultimately unite with the divine, or Ishwara, right at the center of the eyebrows. Pretty much everything in their rulebook is designed around protecting this exact energy. Moving on to Section 2, breaking social taboos. And wow, did they ever reject tradition? Now, remember, this text was formalized in the 1920s and 30s in India, a time of super rigid social hierarchies. That just goes to show how wildly progressive the Samaj was for its era. The rules strictly abolish those rigid traditional customs. For example, they completely banned pulabali, which are traditional funeral defilement rites, and they threw caste barriers for marriage right out the window. Even more surprisingly, they mandated mutual consent for marriage, known as swayamvaram, over traditional forced arrangements. But perhaps the most radical shift? They completely rejected the isolation of menstruating women. Instead of treating menstruation as an impurity, the text renames the menstruating woman Tripura Sundari, meaning she's in a celebrated state of heightened energy. They demanded she be treated happily and merrily. For the 1930s, that is a massive departure from the norm. Section 3 brings us to spiritual biology and diet, where things get, well, highly unorthodox. So they were socially progressive, sure, but their take on human biology was totally unique. Their doctrine outlines a very specific, esoteric process when it comes to death and decay. According to the text, when prana, which they describe as the inner sun or energy, leaves the body, a massive biological shift happens. Without that inner light, they believe the body's blood immediately mixes with its water and turns into literal venom. That, they claim, is exactly why a corpse instantly begins to putrefy and stink. To them, a dead body wasn't just lifeless, it was a literal vessel of poison. And that biological theory totally dictates their diet. Since they believed a corpse is full of venom, the rules explicitly state that consuming flesh, or even eggs, which they saw as having this venomous imbalance, is strictly off limits. You are, quite literally in their eyes, eating the greatest venom. Eating meat introduces this poison into your body, causes dullness and disease, and ultimately destroys the Kundalini Shakti, or that vital life force they were working so hard to protect. They didn't stop at food either. The text strictly forbids intoxicants, and their reasoning is highly specific. They actually claimed that inhaling smoke physically shatters the body's life essence, which they somehow equated to semen flowing through the body like mercury. This shattered essence supposedly mixes with blood and air to create, get this, lungworms. It's totally unscientific, but it has this fascinating internal logic. They also ban snuff, arguing it physically blocks the nasal passages where jiva, that life energy, needs to flow. Oh, and chewing tobacco? Banned, because it forces you to spit out your saliva, which they viewed as a vital, fiery secretion meant to digest your food. All right, Section 4, harmony with nature, and the concept of the unalterable body. This obsession with perfectly preserved energy dictated exactly how the physical body was supposed to interact with the outside world. According to the Samaj, even the clothes you wear can disrupt your energy. The rules actually state that wearing shirts is actively harmful. Why? Because a shirt traps sweat against the skin and blocks your body's natural contact with the air, or vayu. They believed obstructing natural air breeds microbes, causes skin diseases, and leads to premature death. In fact, the text claims that ancient laborers lived past 100 simply because they worked shirtless, completely in sync with nature. Taking that natural logic a step further,
They believed the human body is the perfect, unalterable abode of God. That meant absolutely zero bodily modifications were allowed. The text argues that if God wanted you to have holes in your ears or nose, you would have been born with them. They banned wearing bangles, viewing it as an oppressive practice where women's hands are forcefully squeezed by merchants. They outlawed a cruel regional superstition of scorching newborns with hot needles. And most notably, they absolutely forbade cutting or shaving hair. Removing even a single strand was thought to destroy natural energy, manliness, and vitality.
Which brings us to Section 5, Communal Living and Governance. Let's see what this equality looked like in practice. So how are these complex, intense rules actually enforced day to day? Well, the absolute cornerstone of their community was a practice called sugtini. This was the strict mandate that members, regardless of their gender or background, had to eat from the exact same vessel or leaf together. In a 1930s society that was deeply fractured by caste purity laws regarding who could dine with whom, sugtini was a profound equalizer. It effectively erased all societal caste and gender disparities in daily practice. And food wasn't just sustenance for them, it was highly revered because it protected that all-important jiva. This reverence literally dictated the architecture of their dining halls. The rules explicitly state that food is Anna Raja, the king of food. Because it protects life, you literally have to sit below it. The dining platform had to be built so that the food was physically elevated above the people eating it, showcasing an absolute devotion to life-sustaining energy. But here's the twist. Despite these incredibly rigid dietary and biological laws, the governance of these communities was actually surprisingly democratic. The text lays out that local presidents were to be elected by initiated members. So while the spiritual laws were absolute, the daily administration was placed right in the hands of the community itself. To maintain this really delicate balance of radical social equality and highly unorthodox natural living, though, the rules required strict isolation. Members were absolutely forbidden from joining or attending any outside religious gatherings or associations. The Samaj firmly believed the outside world's rules were fundamentally opposed to the ideals of Siddha Vidya, and mixing with them would completely corrupt the purity of their practice. And that leaves us with a really compelling thought to ponder. Does creating a truly equal, caste-free utopian society mean you have to cut yourself off entirely from the modern world and its scientific understandings? The Siddha Samaj certainly believed that to build a pure society, strict isolation and esoteric rules were the only way to protect life's energy. It is a fascinating look at just how far one group went to rewrite the rules of human existence. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.